The movie opens with the introduction of a woman named Jess. She is seen comforting her young son, holding him close and reassuring him that it was just a bad dream. "Don't worry, I'm always on your side," she whispers soothingly. The next morning, Jess prepares for an outing. As she steps into the garden to collect some laundry, she notices one of her son's toys lying broken on the ground. Inside the house, her son is busy drawing, but his colored pencils accidentally spill onto the floor. As Jess kneels to pick them up, the doorbell suddenly rings. She gets up to check, but when she opens the door, no one is there. Returning inside, Jess resumes packing her bag. She invites her son to come along, but he refuses, showing no interest in accompanying her. Despite her efforts to persuade him, he remains firm in his decision. Left with no choice, Jess leaves him at home and heads out alone. Upon reaching her destination, she is greeted by a friend who immediately notices something is off. "You seem worried," he remarks. Jess, forcing a tired smile, brushes it off. "I'm fine, just exhausted," she replies. Her friend then introduces her to the rest of his group, setting the stage for what's to come. The group had planned to spend their vacation on a boat named Triangle. Along with Jess, several of her friends were also aboard. Shortly after boarding, Jess decides to take a nap. While asleep, she has a strange dream. She finds herself standing alone on a deserted beach. The unsettling vision startles her awake. Just then, a friend approaches her, noticing her distress. "Are you okay?" he asks. Jess, still shaken, brushes it off. "It was just a bad dream, nothing more," she replies. Meanwhile, on another part of the boat, Greg is engaged in conversation with a friend. His friend curiously asks if Jess had originally planned to bring her son along, and if so, why she left him behind. Greg explains that Jess told him her son was at school. However, his friend raises an eyebrow. How could that be possible when it was a Sunday? Greg, slightly irritated, dismisses the question. "Why does it matter? Just focus on what you're doing," he says. As time passes, dark clouds begin to form on the horizon, signaling an impending storm. Greg attempts to establish contact with another ship, hoping to get assistance. While adjusting the radio, he suddenly hears a mysterious voice, an eerie, panicked girl warning, "He will kill us and save us." Before he can respond, the signal cuts off. Moments later, the storm strikes with full force. The crew desperately tries to keep the ship under control, but the violent waves overwhelm them. Triangle is no match for the storm and ultimately sinks. Fortunately, all of them manage to escape the wreck, thanks to their life jackets, drifting into the vast, stormy ocean. Now they find themselves on board their sunken ship, but something is wrong. One of their friends has gone missing. No one has seen her since the disaster, and her whereabouts remain unknown. As they scan the horizon, they spot a massive ship approaching from a distance. Desperate for help, they wave their hands, hoping to catch the attention of whoever is aboard. But as the ship draws closer, something compels them to board it in secret instead. Once on deck, an eerie silence greets them. The ship is completely deserted. No crew, no passengers, nothing. As Jess takes in her surroundings, a strange feeling washes over her. Turning to Greg, she murmurs, "I feel like I've been here before." Meanwhile, Jess's friends stumble upon an old faded painting. It depicts the very ship they are standing on, alongside the image of a king. Beneath the artwork, an inscription tells the king's story, a tale of defying death itself. The king had once reclaimed his life from the god of death, believing he could cheat fate and live forever. Desiring immortality, he was given a task: carry a massive stone from a great mountain. The god of death promised that if he succeeded, he would exist eternally on earth. But the moment the king lifted the stone, it began to roll back down. No matter how many times he carried it, the cycle repeated, an endless punishment for his arrogance. As they absorb the unsettling legend, a sudden metallic clanking sound echoes through the ship. One of Jess's friends investigates and makes a shocking discovery: Jess's keys lying on the floor. But that's impossible. Jess is with them, and she still has her keys in her possession. So how could another set be here? The group stares in disbelief, their unease growing. Just then, one of them suggests that the missing girl, Heather, might be on the ship. Clinging to that hope, they search for her, eventually opening the door to a mysterious room. Inside, they are met with yet another surprise. Tables filled with freshly placed food. The dishes are untouched, as if someone had set them there only moments ago. As Jess and her friends try to make sense of their eerie surroundings, one of them asks for the time. Jess glances at her wristwatch, only to realize that it has stopped at 8:30. Strangely, Greg's watch has frozen at 11:30. Before they can dwell on this anomaly, Jess suddenly notices something unusual. Curious, they move further into the ship, leaving two of their friends behind in the room. As Jess and Greg continue their conversation, an unsettling noise echoes from a nearby room. They cautiously approach the source of the sound and are met with a horrifying sight, a message scrawled in blood across a mirror. It reads, "Go to the theater." Jess immediately feels a deep sense of unease. She warns Greg against following the message, fearing that it could be a trap. However, Greg dismisses her concerns and insists on checking it out. Reluctantly, Jess watches as he enters the theater, but she herself turns back toward the dining area, where they had found the freshly placed meal earlier. But as soon as she steps inside, a chill runs down her spine. The meal that had been steaming hot just moments ago is now completely spoiled, covered in mold as if it had been sitting there for days. What's even more disturbing, her two friends, who had stayed behind in the room, are gone. Confused and increasingly anxious, Jess assumes they must have left on their own. But before she can leave to find them, another horrifying event unfolds. A blood-soaked friend stumbles into the room. His eyes wild with desperation, he suddenly lunges at Jess, attacking her in a frenzied state. In a struggle for survival, Jess fights back instinctively. She counters his attack, and in the chaos, he collapses, lifeless. Just as she tries to comprehend what she has done, the deafening sound of a gunshot echoes through the ship. Panic surging through her, Jess rushes toward the theater. As she enters, she is met with yet another horrifying scene. Greg has been shot. One of her remaining friends is weeping uncontrollably. Through her sobs, she stammers, "Do you know what Greg said before he died?" He said, "Jess shot me." Jess is stunned. "That's impossible. I didn't do anything. Why would I kill Greg?" She protests, but doubt has already set in among the others. Then another friend speaks up. "Jess, you came into our room earlier and told us Greg was calling us. That's why we came here. Because of you." Jess stands frozen, her mind spinning. She has no memory of doing any of this. The pieces aren't adding up. Something impossible is happening to her. But what? As Jess struggles to make sense of the horrifying events around her, a masked stranger suddenly appears and shoots both of her remaining friends. Panic surges through her, and she immediately flees, the killer close on her heels. She dashes through the corridors, desperately trying to escape, while the killer keeps pursuing her. However, just as he raises his gun to shoot again, he realizes he's out of ammunition. Taking advantage of the moment, Jess spots an axe lying nearby. Without hesitation, she grabs it and braces herself as the killer gets closer. As he approaches, Jess swings the axe, injuring him. With the attacker weakened, she demands, "Who are you? What do you want?" The masked figure lets out a ragged breath and replies, "You have to kill them all. It's the only way to go home." Before she can process his cryptic words, the wounded killer suddenly throws himself into the ocean, vanishing beneath the waves. Jess is now completely alone. Just as she begins to gather her thoughts, distant voices catch her attention. She rushes toward the source of the sound and is left utterly shocked by what she sees. The same ship that had wrecked before his back, and standing on it are her friends. Even more terrifying, she sees herself standing among them. They are pleading for help, completely unaware of what awaits them. A chilling realization dawns on Jess. She is trapped in a time loop. Everything is repeating. Her friends, the ship, the events, they are all happening again. As she watches in disbelief, she follows herself, the new version of Jess, and observes from the shadows as everything unfolds just as before. The conversations, the discoveries, even the tragic deaths. She has already lived through all of this. Overwhelmed, Jess unknowingly drops her keys, which fall onto the floor, the same keys her friends had found earlier. Realizing the implications, she stumbles into another room to gather her thoughts. But before she can make sense of it all, she hears a noise. She turns just in time to see her past self, the Jess who has just boarded the ship. Her friend is chasing her, trying to confront her, but unknowingly runs into her real self. In the ensuing chaos, Jess tries to explain everything, but no one listens. In the struggle, she accidentally pushes her friend, causing his head to slam into a metal handle, leaving him injured. Breathless and shaken, Jess stumbles into another room, where she finds a pile of papers scattered across the floor. As she picks one up, her stomach drops. It contains the words, "Kill everyone when they get on the ship." Jess looks around in horror. Scattered nearby are dozens of identical lockets. Her own locket, repeated over and over again. Everything clicks into place. She isn't just trapped in a time loop. Determined to escape the time loop and reunite with her son, Jess takes a gun and sets out to kill everyone. However, when confronted by a friend, she hesitates, leading to his injury. As she hides, she spots another version of herself, the duplicate Jess, with the group. In a desperate attempt to end the cycle, she tries to kill her other self. But in the process, her friend dies. She soon realizes that she herself was the one who killed Greg. Meanwhile, the old Jess deceives two of her friends, luring them into a room where she fatally stabs one of them. The surviving friend escapes to the control room and broadcasts a distress message. "She is killing us," which Greg hears, completing the first full loop. As the storm approaches, Jess follows the distressed girl from the control room, but the girl believes Jess is the murderer. Pursuing her further, Jess stumbles upon a horrifying sight: Sally's lifeless body, repeated countless times. She realizes that every attempt to break the loop has already played out before. In another desperate effort, the new Jess arrives and throws old Jess overboard. Sally also dies, and as Jess looks out, she sees her friends once again standing on the wrecked ship, pleading for help. At that moment, she finally understands the horrifying truth. Whenever everyone dies, the loop resets. As her group boards the ship for the third time, Jess remains trapped in the endless cycle, unable to escape her fate. The cycle continues as the real Jess sets out once again to kill the group, believing it's the only way to break the loop. She writes, "Go to the theater" on the mirror, ensuring events repeat as before. She deceives her two friends in the dining room, telling them Greg called them, just as she had witnessed earlier. Entering the theater, she shoots Greg, fully stepping into the role of the previous killer. With no hesitation, she kills the remaining two friends as well. As we've seen before, a new Jess now begins experiencing the same terrifying cycle, fleeing from an unknown attacker, only for this time, the real Jess to be the one chasing her. Determined that eliminating everyone, including herself, will end the loop, the real Jess relentlessly hunts down her new counterpart. But before she can finish it, the new Jess fights back and throws the real Jess overboard into the ocean. Before drowning, the real Jess utters the same cryptic warning: "Kill them all, and the loop will end." The very words her past self had once spoken to her. Time passes, and suddenly, Jess wakes up on a beach, the same beach from her dream aboard Triangle. The events have come full circle. Jess makes her way home, only to witness a chilling sight: another version of herself inside the house, scolding her son for leaving his toy outside. Watching from the outside, Jess sees her son spill his paints on the floor, just like before. But when she sees the old Jess violently hitting the boy, something snaps. Jess rings the doorbell, luring the old Jess outside. The moment the old Jess steps out, the real Jess sneaks inside and kills her. Her son watches in horror as his mother murders his mother. Trying to soothe him, the real Jess hugs him and whispers, "It was just a nightmare." She then packs the dead body into a bag and places it in her car. With her son beside her, she drives off, seemingly believing she has finally broken free. But fate has other plans. As she drives, a sudden accident occurs. A boy collapses against her windshield and dies. Stepping out, Jess finds herself at the scene of a tragic moment, but she isn't alone. Numerous other versions of herself are there, watching. Countless Jesses have already lived this moment before her. A sinking realization washes over her. This too has happened before. Panicked and confused, Jess drives away, but her son notices blood splattered on the car. His face fills with fear. As Jess desperately tries to change her fate, she finds herself caught in yet another tragic twist. A truck collides with her car, resulting in a devastating accident. Although it appears that both Jess and her son have perished in the crash, the Jess who died was not the real one. The real Jess survives and manages to escape the scene. Soon, a taxi driver approaches her, asking if she's all right. Shaken but composed, she replies, "Yes, I'm fine." Without hesitation, she gets into the taxi, heading straight back to the dock, the place where she first boarded the Triangle ship. As the taxi pulls up, the driver asks, "Ma'am, I've switched off my meter. Will you be coming back here?" Jess, already knowing the answer, calmly responds, "Yeah, I'll be back here again." Stepping onto the dock, she sees the same familiar faces, her friends waiting for her, just like before. Greg approaches and asks, "Did you bring your son with you?" Jess, echoing the lie she has told before, replies, "He's at school." Everything is happening exactly as it did before. She boards Triangle once more, trapped in an endless time loop, one she cannot escape. She keeps repeating the same cycle, believing she can somehow bring her son back. But the truth is far darker. The real meaning of Jess's time loop is finally revealed: her punishment. As they had read on the ship, the death god had once cursed a king for defying fate. Now Jess is trapped in the same cruel cycle, reliving the consequences of her own actions. Jess had mistreated her son, failing to be the loving mother he needed. Instead of realizing her mistake, she continues to deceive herself, covering up her past by killing other versions of herself and trying to escape with her son. But she never truly learns. And because she refuses to acknowledge her guilt, the death god, disguised as the taxi driver, keeps returning her to the same place, forcing her to restart the loop over and over again. As the film comes to an end, Jess unknowingly re-enters the cycle, sealing her fate. The triangle never ends.